Mr. President, I'd like to turn briefly to another urgent topic. We must restore order at our southern border and enforce our immigration laws in a fair and humane way. That's why the Senate has been engaged in bipartisan talks on a path forward for weeks. The Republican governor of Texas takes a much different view. He has implemented cruel, even deadly, and ineffective immigration policies that sow chaos, risk lives, and prevent federal border officials from doing their jobs. Last week, a woman and 2 children tragically died in the Rio Grande River while Mexican authorities rescued other migrants in distress. U.S. Border Patrol could not reach these migrants in need because the Texas National Guard actively blocked access to the Rio Grande River. This is just the latest tragedy resulting from Governor Abbott's policies. As part of its so-called Operation Lone Star, Texas has strung razor wire along the border that has seriously injured migrants and has dropped migrant children off at truck stops in Illinois in sub-zero temperatures. We warned him. The governor of Illinois warned Governor Abbott of Texas that if you haphazardly drop these migrants off in Chicago at this time of year, terrible things can occur. A few weeks ago, a little boy died. God knows which others were in danger because of the governor of Texas and his strategy. Just last week, Texas began arresting immigrants under a new law that makes it a state crime to cross border without inspection, placing them in state custody. Governor Abbott defends these policies even though there is zero evidence that they deter migrants from crossing the border. We must discourage migrants from risking their lives by approaching the United States between ports of entry. But we cannot stand by while Governor Abbott increases the likelihood of injury or death. Despite their desperation to reach safety, most migrants wish to enter the United States lawfully. Many wait months at our border for appointments to make asylum claims. In defending his policies, the governor of Texas recently bragged, and I quote, "The only thing we're not doing is we're not shooting people who come across the border, because, of course, the Biden administration would charge us with murder." Direct quote from Governor Abbott. His actions are not only dangerous and cruel, they're unconstitutional. Under our Constitution, states do not have the right to pass their own laws preempting federal laws on immigration. Just yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the federal government, allowing Border Patrol agents to cut through or remove razor wire that the governor of Texas installed on the border. As a former justice, Anthony Kennedy wrote in his opinion in Arizona versus the United States, which found parts of Arizona's anti-immigrant law unconstitutional, and I quote, "The history of the United States is in part made up of the stories, talents, and lasting contributions of those who crossed oceans and desert to come here." With that sentiment in mind, Congress must do its job and pass immigration laws that honor our history as a nation of immigrants and provide the critical resources necessary to address challenges at our border. Mr. President, I guess I'm pretty well known as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee in favor of immigration, legal immigration to this country. I believe immigration is a critical element in who we are and what we will become. It is part of our past. It will be part of our future. My mother was an immigrant to this country, and I've never forgotten it. I'm lucky to be standing here today as a United States Senator because her parents had the courage to come to a country where they didn't even speak the language in the hopes of a better life for her and her children. One of her children is now standing in the United States Senate. I believe that's part of America's history. But there are certain elements which we must acknowledge. Number one, the United States cannot absorb all of the people who want to come to this country at this moment. We have to have an orderly process that makes sense not only for the migrants, but also makes sense for America first and foremost. We have to be cognizant and sensitive to our nation's safety and security. That's number one. We should never knowingly allow anyone to come to this country who would cause us harm. Secondly, we have to make sure that those who come will add to America, and I believe most will. If given a chance, they become part of our economy, even starting at the lowest levels and working their way up. The story of immigration in America. In addition to that, we need to work with other countries to regulate the flow of refugees. The refugee crisis in the world today is the worst it has ever been, and we're seeing it evidenced in the fact that those who present themselves at our southern border are often from places like China and Asia and Africa, and they find their way to the Mexican border with the United States in the hopes of a future. We need an orderly process, but we also need to make sure that we have legal authorization of people to come to this country to work. I can't tell you how many people in Illinois have come to me and said we are desperate for workers. Americans won't fill these jobs, and we need people who will. All the way up from farming to industry, that's the story, and that's the reality. What we need to do is come to an agreement that is sensible here, a bipartisan agreement, and do it quickly. The numbers approaching our border are so overwhelming, we have no choice but to do that. I want to work on a bipartisan basis with those in good faith and goodwill who will recognize that immigration is not only our history but our future, but it must be in an orderly fashion. That's what I'm looking for, and I think America is as well. I yield the floor.